Kia ora, good morning. Welcome to Connecting the Dots podcast. So, a lot of people probably aren't going to like me for this. I've been keeping my mouth shut for years on this case. I have been observing this case for many years in New Zealand when I was a teenager, when we first got things like Sky TV, which was just like the wizardry of, all hail TV. For a little Pacific island called New Zealand, when we were introduced to American shows and British shows and all that, like Forensic Files, Medical Detectives, Unsolved Mysteries with like Robert Stack and, all that sort of thing. Like, my whole world opened up to more than just the books I was able to get at the library and, what little TV we had with our measly little 2 channels, eventually 3 channels. I think maybe now we have 5 or something without cable. I learned about this case and I knew immediately what it was. Even as a teenager, I knew immediately what it was. But some of these cases, like the Hinterkaifeck murders and the Rievaulx Abbey murders, I sit and observe and I keep my mouth shut and I don't speak until I am ready to talk, because I won't put my name to anything until I'm sure. And like with the Jack the Ripper and Cleveland Torso murders, when I knew I got it wrong, I put my big girl pants on, admitted I was wrong, and corrected it. Now, this case has been driving me up the wall for a long time. For many years, I have had to sit and watch, quote unquote, paranormal investigators, psychics, clairvoyants, mediums, clairaudioics, all these people that claim to have these gifts, all these people that claim, to be experts in the occult and stuff, go to this place and basically spread fear based on lies. And it's one of the reasons, this case is one of the reasons why I decided many years ago, when I first started trying to, train students up to come on location to help me, because, I was married to an American, and in 2000, we got married in 2017, 2016, I started taking on students, because I wanted to train people up to come and join me to go and make these shows and do these podcasts, so that we could go around the world with sponsorship and all that to make these shows and clear up these inconsistencies and lies and accusations. I am very protective of the dead. I am very protective of the memory of the dead. As a gatekeeper, as a high priestess, when it comes to when it comes to the life cycle of, the evolving soul, be it animal, mineral or vegetable, I take what I do very seriously, because it's my responsibility to help people and to help life, not just people, live their best with respect and everything that they deserve, to be able to transition and evolve. Because as an evolutionary theorist, everything has the right to evolve naturally and live out their life cycle to its fullest potential in its lifetime, unhindered by human interference. And when that doesn't happen, I have been given the responsibility through my birthright, which goes back many centuries of generations, as a Pacific Islander, as an Egyptian, as a Celt, as a Pict, as a Gaul, Viking, whatever you want to call it. My bloodline for all of this goes back centuries, and it's all well documented. that my people, no matter which branch of my family tree you're on, take their role and responsibility when it comes to the evolution of the spirit or the soul very seriously. And I was raised by my father to do these investigations. I was raised by my mother to nurture life. While my parents weren't perfect, they were the two first teachers I had, as well it should be. That is the role of parents. They are completely responsible 100% for the welfare and development of what that child is going to be when they grow up. And my parents knew that with me. And regardless of anything, with my dad always being away and my mum being physically abusive, they did love me, and I knew they loved me, and I never held any grudges. I got over the pain. I healed my inner childhood woundings when I went through my ascension, and now I work with my parents, who are both deceased. I keep their spirit within me while I do this work because I know it's what they wanted me to do. My mother had always wanted me to be in law enforcement, but I was terrified of doing the exams because I'm not good at maths, and I knew that you had to do maths. And my father wanted me to join the military, but ew, I would have just wanted to be around all those gorgeous boys in uniform, like back in those days. I'm a lover, not a fighter, unless I'm standing up for my rights or the rights of somebody else, because I am the sort of person that my whole life I protect the underdog. And my parents knew all of this, and I swear to you, my father knew what I was going to be when I grew up. So when this case came about and I saw the injustice that was being done, I didn't say anything, and I haven't said anything for a long time, because of the fact that this was one of the places that I insisted on wanting to go once I got to America to do the shows. But of course, after students turning into a cult with my husband and my ex-husband and blah, 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 I mean, quite the story to tell. If you follow my social media or my YouTube and that, you're going to know my story and what they put me through. But I have said to my boys, because we have made a list of the places that we want to visit when we are out on the road making these shows. And when it comes to America, this is one place that I want to go to, and I want to get permission to go there and fix this bloody problem once and for all. Because everybody that investigates it focuses on the lies and the drama for likes and subscribes and viewers and money and fame and, making money off it, and nobody is staring the obvious in the face. And that angers me, because everybody is overlooking the real reason why when you go in there you feel such dread and sorrow and pain and suffering and fear. And so I was laying there this morning having my coffee, my morning coffee, because I still intend to go to this place. There are hundreds of thousands of places around the world that I intend to go to with my biorhythmic field generator and my knowledge. And I want to cleanse this place after I investigate it, and I want to settle this place down, not for the people that reportedly haunt the place, not for the people that go there, not for the people that I don't give a crap about them. They if they want to sit in their lies and their filth, that's fine by me. But I'm going there for the innocent voices in all of this, and it is for them that I will go there and use my biorhythmic field generator, and my sons and I will settle that place down and lay all those poor souls to rest that nobody else is even looking at dealing with, and nobody else would know how to deal with them. But I'm going to go there. I will go to Kentucky, and I will go to this place, and I will sort it out for the suffering of the pure and innocent whose lives were affected there, that nobody seems to care about. And they are my totem. They are one of my totems. and I need to go there and represent them, and you know, help what is trapped there cross over. So of course the place I'm talking about is Bobby Mackey's World of Music in Wilder, Kentucky. And the reason why it makes me so angry is because everybody's overlooking the fact that it was a slaughterhouse and those animals were treated like dirt. I was a vegetarian for over 20 years, but because of my gluten allergy, because now with doing quantum magnetics, my time jumping takes a lot of protein out of me. I'm allergic to eggs, so I had to start eating meat in order to get my protein levels back up. So yes, I eat animals, but I only eat meat a couple of days a week, but mostly more, you know, when I've been doing a lot of work. And the meat that I eat is they don't come from slaughterhouses where tens of thousands of them are, you know, like I live very cheaply on my meat, but when I do eat my meat, it's good quality. It's not the sort of stuff that, you know, I mean, I gave my offering to the animals in the fact that, you know, there is a life cycle, and people need to understand that they know what their life cycle is. The food that we eat, they know their life cycle, but all they ask is that we treat them with respect and we let them die with dignity. And it is with the understanding that when they die, we live off them, and when we die, they live off us. Our future generations will feed them and their future generations, and their future generations feed us and their future generations. It is the circle of life. But every animal that we eat has the right to die with dignity. And the slaughterhouse in that place, they didn't even care what happened to them. They disregarded them. They slaughtered them. They dumped their bodies, you know, in silos. They poured their blood into the river, and people need to understand that with water is highly magnetic. It's highly, highly magnetic. And if you see my, gosh, where was it? Rievaulx Abbey. When I did an investigation at Rievaulx Abbey, and it was actually that place that introduced me to, started changing my view on religion. But there was a river along there, and I was explaining in that video, I'll put a link in the description box, about why they were so creative there, why the monks were so artistic and musical and creative there. And I explained it's because they were next to that river, because, you know, water is highly magnetic and highly charged, and it absorbs things like music and laughter and sorrow, and, you know, it also reflects music and laughter and sorrow. And they were pouring the blood of these poor terrified animals. If you know anything about cows, they're very sociable animals. They have, you know, like a hierarchy. They have best friends, and, you know, they're extremely maternal animals. And their blood was being poured into this river, and nobody cared. There were no rituals done. There was nothing done to show appreciation for these poor animals, and there never is anything done. I personally think that what we need to do is only eat the animals that die of natural causes, and that we just have to, you know, brave it and go, you know, half vegetarian, half omnivorous, and only eat animals that die of natural causes. I would be more than happy to do that. I don't believe that we should be slaughtering anything. But until we can all agree to start treating the the planet with a bit more respect. I'm doing everything I can to have respect for the animals that give themselves for me to eat. As an Indigenous woman, we always give thanks to the animals that sacrifice themselves for us. It's something that Indigenous people have been doing for centuries. We understand the importance of having to live alongside each other. You know, we both need each other. Like, you know, cows need to be milked. If they're not milked, they get udder infections and it can be painful and they can die. And you know, so it's like we need to all work together to have a better, healthier understanding of the true meaning of the circle of life, and be a bit more respectful to the animals that are giving themselves. But I personally think that we should only be eating animals that die of natural causes, and you know, mix it up a little. A lot of these animals don't have long natural life cycles anyway, so you know, it's not going to hurt us to go a couple of days a week without eating meat, you know. So I have a lot of dairy, full fat dairy, to get my protein from dairy and nuts that way when I'm not having meat. And I go a couple of days a week without having meat. So you know, it's not going to hurt us. But anyway, I've gone off on a water. It doesn't hold negative energy per se. You can't stick something negative in water and then expect the water to get rid of the negative energy. It doesn't work like that, because water evaporates, and water, you know, spreads out, you know, and so it just spreads the energy out or up. You can have a glass of water, and eventually over time, you know, through the sun, through the heat, through the temperature of the room, the water is going to evaporate. But the water evaporates into the atmosphere. You know, that's why we get clouds in that, is because water evaporates and gets soaked up into the gases in that, in our atmosphere, because of the sun's rays. And you know, and then we get clouds and stuff, and then eventually when, you know, it holds too much and it can't hold it anymore, it starts to rain. So people mistakenly think that by putting perceived possessed objects or bodies in that into water, that it's going to get rid of the problem, but it doesn't. It just spreads it out. And unless it is sacred water, unless it is sacred land where you have permission to put the object in there, unless it's blessed, unless, you know, you have the approval of Papatuanuku, Grandmother Earth, Gaia, Te Whiti, whatever you want to call her, unless you have that permission to do that, anything that you put in water is not going to have the effect of getting rid of negative energy, because it's only going to spread it out. And if you know anything about the history of Licking River and Wilder in Kentucky, you know, the river that goes along that area where Bobby Mackey's is, like, you'll understand what I'm talking about. There's been a lot of death and a lot of slaughter and a lot of unnecessary suffering that has been absorbed by that poor river. And that river needs a massive deep cleansing. And when I go to Kentucky with my boys to make my shows, I'm going to cleanse this river. I will have the permission of Neptune as a water sign. You know, I'm born water. My first taniwha, you know, our first, my ancestors' first taniwha was a water taniwha. So I know what I'm doing. Poseidon as well. Poseidon is one of my gods. Neptune, being a Scorpio, I'm a water sign, so you know, like, I know what I'm doing, and I'm Indigenous, so I know what I'm doing, and I know I will have permission to cleanse that river, because it has absorbed too much. And when it comes to that nightclub, that club, it has absorbed the blood of God knows how many thousands, tens of thousands of poor cows um, who were sacrificed there. Now, other than having to deal with the trauma of the cows and animals and that were slaughtered there and treated like crap and disrespected, we got to look at the other side of it. So this story about Pearl Bryan and her head being dumped in the hole in the ground is completely untrue. There is no evidence to suggest that her head was put there. There has also her killers, Scott Jackson and Alonzo Walling. They did not dump her body there. Her body was dumped about 5 miles away. People say about 2 miles, but her body was dumped in the location of where the YMCA is now in Fort Thomas. And when I looked at the distance between the slaughterhouse and the YMCA in Fort Thomas, it is about 5 miles away, about 10 minutes by car. So in 1896, it would have been a lot longer journey than 10 minutes by car. That's by car now in today's travel time. But in those days, in 1896, it would have taken them a lot longer to get there than 10 minutes. They were not Satanists. There is no evidence to suggest that they were Satanists, so where that came from is complete speculation, like it's just lies. It's people basically picking up a ball and running with it, not knowing where the hell they were going with their, where the finish line, where the try line was. They just kept running with that ball, never reaching the try line. And it pees me off. It makes me angry because of the fact that what happens is that people go to this place and other places like it with this preconceived idea of what's happened there, and none of it's true. And they're ignoring the incredible stuff that has happened there that has been documented. But because everybody assumes that it's evil, that, possessions happen there, that satanic rituals have happened there, even though, some morons have gone there, apparently, according to the police, and they've been caught trying to do rituals and stuff. There is no evidence to suggest that her head was anywhere near it or her body was anywhere near that building. They weren't even drinking in that bar. They weren't anywhere near that place. And her body was found around about 5 miles away, which, as I said, back in the 1890s, that would have been quite a bit of a distance to get to if you didn't have a car, which obviously they didn't back then. Even the police at the time, who were interviewed after the hangings of Jackson and Walling, said that they believed, because they were dental students, what they think happened was they were dental students. She was 5.5 months pregnant. They tried to perform an autopsy and it killed her. They panicked, chopped her head off to, reveal her identity, and they think that they put her head in the furnace of the dental school. There is no evidence to suggest that the last words before Jackson was hung was, putting a curse on the people that prosecuted them and the building where the head was and blah, blah, blah. None of that is real. It is all made up. There is no evidence to suggest that murder-suicides took place there. There's a couple of things that went on there, when it was a prohibition establishment and stuff like that, but you're going to get that sort of thing when you're dealing with gangsters back in those days, you know what I mean? But as far as, multiple murders and satanic rituals and suicides taking place there, none of it's real. The story of Joanna and Robert, the dancer who was pregnant, her daddy wouldn't let her be with the man. Apparently her daddy threatened, if he goes near you, I'm going to kill him, blah, blah, blah. And apparently hung the lover, Robert. And then to get revenge, she poisoned her daddy, and then she poisoned herself. These people didn't exist. Bobby Mackey wrote a song about it, and people, I think, took his song that he wrote in like 1983, I believe, 1983. It's either 83 or 85. I'll link in the description box. He wrote a song about it, and I think people took his song as gospel and made up a whole thing about it. However, people are overlooking the fact that some of the recorded stuff that has happened there should give you evidence enough to prove that it's not a place of evil. And that's the fact that a lot of people hear music playing and laughter. And because energy, gets absorbed into the atmosphere, stone tape theory, and with the river running alongside it, even though there was a lot of animal tragedy and a lot of death and slaughter that went along that river, the fact that it's still able to record high frequency into the atmosphere, such as laughter and music, because I keep saying, the 4 highest vibrations in the universe is love, laughter, music, and faith. And so, when you hear people laughing and you hear people celebrating, and when you hear music playing and people dancing and all that sort of thing in perceived paranormal places, regardless of whether there's been anything negative reported there, the fact alone that that building was able to absorb 2 of the highest frequencies known in the universe should tell you there and then that you have nothing to fear. Now, with the case with Bobby Mackey's wife, with her reports of seeing the blood in the drain and being pushed down the stairs, 2 things you need to understand about this is that, and this is one of the things that I knew when I was like a kid, she was pregnant, and when you're pregnant, you have no control over gravity. I've got very large, I'm very large in the mammamular area, very large in the mammamular area. And even without being pregnant, when I bend over, I have a propensity to tip forward because I have a lot up top and not much down the bottom. When I bend over, I can tip forward. It is a big joke with my sons. Oh, here she goes, because they'll start like bending over to pick up something, and I'll start kind of like tipping forward and kind of stumble forward because, my breasticular area gives me that extra gravity. So, of course, when I bend over, but she was pregnant, and when I was pregnant, it was even worse. When I was pregnant, if I had to pick anything up, I had to do it kind of picking it up from behind rather than bending over to pick it up, because with carrying, babies that were like 10 plus pounds towards the end of my pregnancy, plus, my mammamular area, like I didn't stand a chance. I didn't stand a chance with gravity. And so what I think, what she was dealing with, because you have to remember she was doing dishes, she leaned over into the sink. She felt a force behind her in her shoulders and neck area, and then when she got pushed down the stairs, she was sweeping up the broken light bulb, and so she would have been slightly bent over, and then she felt the push. What she doesn't realize, and what you need to understand, is when you're pregnant, your ovaries release something called relaxin, or relaxin, just say relaxin, because my Kiwi accent, I pronounce words how they're spelt. I enunciate every word the way it's spelt. And relaxin softens all your ligaments and muscles to allow the baby to grow. And it's really bad. Like it works especially for, you know, like your stomach and leg muscles, your feet, your ankles, but, you know, obviously your shoulders and that as well, because as the baby's growing, you need to be able to be looser and more relaxed, and your muscles and tendons and that become softer with the hormone, um, so that you can carry the extra weight. And so it seems to me basically what happened was, as she's doing these chores, she was leaning forward and the relaxing kicked in, and, you know, her muscles maybe spasmed, and she felt like she was being pushed. It used to happen to me a lot when I was pregnant. I used to get really bad cramp too. But her seeing the blood in the sink, because she's pregnant and she's got a pure soul growing within inside her, and the younger you are, the closer you are to still being a spirit or a soul. She had this pure soul growing inside of her. She would have been more receptive to energy and having visions and premonitions, and, you know, having time slips and time bends and that, than she would when she wasn't pregnant, because of the fact that she's basically got like a living angel growing inside of her body, and her baby would have been still connected to the atomic frequency, and so it would have made her highly perceptive. Mothers, you know, once a woman becomes a mother, her intuition, her instincts, and her receptivity for gauging energy, and that becomes extra heightened, like supernaturally heightened, because the second a woman gets pregnant, with 99%, with real women, with women who are actually like, you know, I'm not going to say all women, because some women don't look after their babies and don't look after their kids or themselves when they're pregnant, but real women, you know, that need to nurture and protect the unborn child. It makes us more instinctual, more intuitive, more aware of our surroundings, more guarded, because now, you know, we're mama bears, and like a mama bear, it is um, in every fibre of our being to then protect our children until the day we die and beyond, like my mother does now. She's been gone since 2005, and yet here she is, you know, helping me do all of this and helping me deal with all of this that I've had to deal with in trying to protect my own sons. So that explains her. As for Carl Lawson and the demonic possession, this is where I get so mad as well, because everybody wants to talk about what happened to him, and at the time when it was happening, nobody really wanted to do anything to fix it. And now I've done some research into him, and he seems like he was a really lovely man, very hardworking, very loyal, very dedicated. And apparently he had been working in that building at various jobs and that since he was 15 years old, and he'd never had any problems there before. And then he lost his job, you know, when it was the previous business, and then when Bobby Mackey built it, he got the job back and became like the caretaker. Now, what you need to understand, and I have watched quite a few videos just to get my facts straight. I've read a lot of articles just to get my facts straight. Nothing was happening with him before Bobby Mackey took over, and things only started happening with him after Bobby Mackey started threatening him with, if you don't keep your mouth shut, you're going to lose your job, because he was reporting experiencing things along with Bobby's wife, and people started talking about the place being haunted while he was the barman and blah blah blah. And apparently Bobby Mackey had kept saying to him, keep your mouth shut, you're going to ruin the business, you're going to ruin the reputation of the business, you know, like if you don't keep your mouth shut, like you're going to lose your job. And it was after all of this that Carl started having the negative experiences, because I think, basically, to cut a long story short, in been threatened with losing his job after he'd been unemployed, you know, and this place was his home, it paid his salary. After being told to keep his mouth shut, he needed to express what he was experiencing. It is really, really important when you are having these experiences, perceived paranormal, you know, any of these experiences, it is so important to be able to get it out, because, you know, half the trouble with children, and especially if you're a creative empath in that, it is in through your friends and family and your society telling you you're crazy and keep your mouth shut, and, you know, that didn't happen, and, you know, the gaslighting. It is the treatment of the gaslighting and then being forced to hold it all in that magnifies the negative activity, because then they start feeling not heard, they start feeling disrespected, they start feeling threatened, they start feeling unsure of themselves, they question their psychological state of mind, you know, and then it festers. There might be resentment, there might be anger, there might be bitterness, and it starts to fester. And so, because then they're told to keep their mouth shut, it festers and builds and builds and builds. And then, of course, it has to come out. Energy has to go somewhere. And so it goes out, and then it, you know, it becomes perceived possessions, demonic possessions. And that poor man was made to sit and fester in the filth of what it was he was experiencing it, and in his need to want to express it, it came out as a basically dissension psychosis. You know, and then you start to see things and you start to hear things and you start to experience things that aren't real. But because by that point you have convinced yourself within your mind that that's what it is, or this is what's happening, you then manifest it, you make it happen, even though there's no basis for truth in the reality. Even though there's no historical evidence, even though there's no factual evidence, no documented evidence, if you believe it enough in the psychology of your own mind, you manifest it to happen in reality. Like the Bill Vale situation. And Carl Lawson is kind of pretty much the same thing. And they gave him a, you know, the reason why his holy water wasn't working, the reason why his crucifix wasn't working is because he was angry by that point. He felt unheard, he felt disrespected, whether he said it or not. And then he may have dredged up a lot of unresolved childhood issues that festered. He may have come from a family where his parents told him, you know, sit down, shut up, keep your mouth shut, don't say anything. He may have witnessed things in his jobs where he was told, sit down, shut up, don't say anything. And so all of that would have manifested. It would have triggered some sort of childhood or, you know, past life wounding. They said he was speaking German and Latin during his exorcism. Well, obviously, if he hadn't been exposed to German and Latin growing up as a kid, because you got to remember your brain remembers everything, and if your brain doesn't remember well, your brain does remember everything, but your soul remembers everything. Like every life you've ever had prior to you being you, your soul documents everything. So if he wasn't exposed to German or Latin as a child, and he just doesn't remember that he didn't learn it, you know, in his moment of access to the atomic frequency, when the pastor came and exposed him to God, you know, to help lighten his burden and exorcise the demons that had manifested within inside him, then it would have been in some of his past lives, he would have been a German or German speaking and Latin speaking. And so when he had the exorcism and the pastor came in and opened the gates to, you know, his Lord and Saviour, his God, through the scriptures and through the moment of exorcism, he would have had access to the atomic frequency where all of that exists, and then he would have tapped into who he was in past lives, and the German would have come out and the Latin would have come out. So, you know, that when you hear of people speaking languages they didn't know in their lifetime, it's because either they were exposed to it when they were children and didn't know that they, or didn't remember that they were exposed to it. So when the gates were opened up, so to speak, when the veil was lifted, it comes back through memory, or it comes back through cellular memory, through past lives, through who they were in past lives. And that explains why people can speak different languages when they're possessed. So, unfortunately, Carl passed away at the age of 53 because I think that, from what it sounds like, the toll on his psychological mind, the toll on his body from everything that he was experiencing was too much for him. And he eventually, he was on a path to dissension. And this is why it's so important for me to get my work out there and to continue to do my shows and my podcasts and work on my biorhythmic field generator patent, and hold my head up and walk through the fire regardless of what's been thrown at me, because of the fact that my observation for creative empaths and people who are exposed to the paranormal world and anything within the Schumann resonance frequency, they don't live very long once they start experiencing the effects of the Schumann resonancy. And the Schumann resonancy creates paranormal activity, poltergeist activity, all that sort of stuff. I became an occult scientist to be able to explain all of this to people, to get these shows out there so that I could help people like Carl. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but his story I can now use to help other people in the future, because this stuff is still happening. It's always going to happen until people wake up and realize the damage that you do to yourself when you believe the wrong things. You can manifest paranormal activity and poltergeist activity and demonic possessions and all of that just by believing that it's there. And now you have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of paranormal investigators and psychics and clairvoyants and mediums and all of that, bloody most haunted and ghost adventurers and all that, going there, filling the place with lies, filling the place with fear and dread, and innocent people are being affected by it. And I think that half the reason why Carl was affected the way he was is because of the fact that people didn't understand what was happening to him. Nobody knew how to help him. And everybody started perpetuating this myth that, with the gossip that was swirling around that place by that point, by the time he died, by the time he had his exorcism and then eventually crossed over, it fed into the fear, and it feeds into the fear. And that place needs a deep, massive cleansing, and sage isn't going to do it, and the Bible isn't going to do it. What you need to understand when it comes to possessions and exorcisms and that is that the Bible isn't going to do any good if the person you're trying to exorcise doesn't have a belief in God. Or they might be, from a long history of being atheists or agnostics, or, they might have inner woundings with their faith and that sort of thing. So a Bible and a priest and a pastor and a minister and all that isn't going to cut it. And I made sure that when I developed the biorhythmic field generator many years ago, when it was supposed to be a kinetic engine, I took that into consideration, because the BFG works regardless of faith. It's got nothing to do with what religion you are or what you believe your God is or who you believe your God is or anything like that. It works purely with frequency and energy, and opening up the atomic frequency in order to lift it from the ground, lift it from the earth, lift it from the stratosphere, and take it up into the atomic frequency, where things like the sun and the other planets can then, dispose of it by the time it gets to that point, frequency-wise, like the wow sound that was recorded in 1977 that I talked about in a quick little podcast, the wow sound That's the atomic frequency. That's the sound of the atomic frequency. And that high resonating frequency obliterates lower negative frequencies. And so, what I do as an Indigenous woman, as a high priestess, as a gatekeeper, I open the gates and I let energy go through to be absorbed and transmuted into something positive so that it can then be transformed and start again. And then it gives everything the chance and the ability to be able to start again at a higher frequency than what it was when it was still here on earth. So I got pushed to say it. I got pushed to make this podcast because I can't sit back any longer and hear people talk about this place like it's evil when it's not. Document lies that never happened. Talk about innocent people that don't deserve it, and completely ignore the fact that a lot of animals died there and nobody's doing anything to help the spirits of the animals whose energy would have been seeped into the floorboards, seeped into the river, seeped into the land, seeped into the building tenfold, 1,000-fold, a trillionfold more than any supposed activity that happened there, whether it is true or not, from the human standpoint. So animals are one of my 3 keys as a gatekeeper: animals, children, and nature. And cows have been my totems for many years. They are the totem of motherhood. They are the totem of community. They are the totem of nurturing and cultivation. They are the totem of contemplation and patience. And cows have been my totem for many years. And so I'm allowed to go there, and I will help the souls of those poor cows in the way that nobody else could. Prayer book, and sage isn't going to cut it in a place like that. So if I am allowed to actually go there, but even if I'm not, I can still do it from standing outside. I don't need to gain entry. With my biorhythmic field generator, I don't need to gain entry into any of these places, especially because I know a lot of places that profit from the tourism and selling haunted ghost tours and all of that in these places. They're not going to let someone like me in there, because I would shut it down the second I turned my BFG on after doing my investigation. Once I did my investigation, I'd know what frequency to set my BFG on, and I would shut it all down. And then they wouldn't make money and nobody would come to investigate, and then they'd just be, your normal average everyday establishment. You could build an island from scratch and put a building on it from scratch. And yes, it is possible to create a man-made island. You can make a man-made island from scratch and put buildings in it from scratch and still experience paranormal activity and demonic possessions in that, if the people who built it, if the people who created it, if the people who live there aren't of a balanced psychological state of mind. So, whether I'm allowed to go there or not, I'm going to go there, and I will either, if I'm allowed to stand in the building, I will do it. If not, I will do it from outside when I, because I'm going to do the river anyway. And I'm going to sort that place out and let those poor cows finally rest in peace. I will, alleviate that building and that land and that water of all the deaths that it has witnessed of those poor animals being slaughtered, and then I can rest in peace, because it's on my bucket list. It's one of the places on my bucket list. I've been talking to my boys about our bucket lists, because I said, make your bucket list, and then we can start ticking stuff off when we go out on the road to make our shows. And Bobby Mackey's has been on my bucket list for many, many, many years. And I was hesitant to do a podcast about it because I actually wanted to do a show. When I do the Eye in the Sky shows, I wanted to actually go there on location and film it on location and do what I do. But I was pushed to do it. And as you know, I'm an intuitive podcaster. So, you know, here I am doing it. I will put links in the description box below, and you don't have to believe anything I'm saying, you know, but I'm putting it out there because I couldn't take it anymore. And so I had to say something. So this is my podcast for Boy Mackey's. And like I said, when we go to Kentucky, I'm going to cleanse that river, and I'm going to cleanse that place, whether I'm allowed inside the establishment or not, as I don't need to be there. My biorhythmic field generator will take care of that. And then I can tick that off my bucket list, and I will sleep a little easier at night, knowing that those poor animals have finally been crossed over. So I will speak to you later. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Until next time, ka kite anō. Mwah.